Bon dia a tothom, welcome, benvinguts, benvingudes a la segona sessió del cicle Brexit, tot el que necessites saber. Aquest és un conjunt de webinars que realitzem amb els experts especialistes en aquest tema que col·laboren habitualment amb l'Oficina Tècnica de Barreres a la Internacionalització d'Acció. Aquests experts, com el UK DIT, DEFRA, HMRC, British Chamber, entre d'altres, ens donen suport per tal de donar resposta als principals obstacles que es troben les empreses catalanes a l'hora de fer negocis amb el Regne Unit. Gràcies a tots ells pel seu suport. I centrant-nos avui en el tema que ens ocupa, recordem els antecedents que ens han portat fins aquí. La mitjanit del 31 de desembre de 2020, el Brexit es va fer finalment efectiu. Amb la finalitat de pal·liar els efectes d'aquesta sortida sobre el govern, el Regne Unit ha posat en marxa un nou període de transició durant el 2021 i 2022, marcat per diverses dates clau en què s'aniran explicant noves mesures reguladores per diferents sectors. Per aquest motiu, des d'Acció, estem duent a terme aquest cicle Brexit, tot el que necessites saber, que anirà anticipant de tots els canvis diferents per cada sector. Sector químic, agroalimentari, farma, cultura, retail, etc. En aquest segon webinar coneixerem tots els detalls sobre el final de la moratòria del sector agroalimentari i que ha permès fins a la data que les empreses catalanes puguin continuar venent al Regne Unit amb certa normalitat. Destacats experts en la matèria del govern britànic ens explicaran els requisits necessaris en àmbits regulatori, duanes, temes fitosanitaris, perquè les empreses catalanes puguin seguir venent dins del sector agroalimentari a partir de l'1 d'octubre. És important, i per això realitzem aquest webinar, que les empreses es preparin amb els nous certificats i les noves autoritzacions que faran falta. I cal fer-ho amb temps, doncs, com tots sabeu, alguns tràmits són de llarga durada i necessiten un temps per poder-se realitzar. Per fer-ho tot més entenedor, avui hem dividit el webinar en dos blocs principals. En el primer bloc, Jordi Tordera, consultor sènior de l'Oficina Tècnica de Barreres, començarà explicant les diferents eines, serveis gratuïts que Acció posa a la vostra disposició per ajudar-vos a fer front al Brexit. Després, Paul Clark, director del UK DIT, parlarà sobre la nova relació entre el Regne Unit i la Unió Europea. A continuació, Fabio Montenó ens explicarà els processos duaners que cal tenir presents a partir d'ara. Després d'aquest bloc podeu anar fent preguntes i farem preguntes als ponents. Per això és important, i ja us avanço i us animo des de ja, a la part de baix, a la part on posa Q&A, d'anar posant les preguntes a aquest primer bloc, perquè quan acabi el primer ja les podem fer en el ponent. Seguidament, quan acabem aquest torn de preguntes, Anastàcia Bernhardt ens explicarà els controls sanitaris i fitosanitaris que cal tenir en compte a partir de l'1 d'octubre i que cal preparar prèviament. Després farem un altre bloc, un altre debat, una altra estona de preguntes en aquesta ponent. Finalment, també, si veiem que donés més temps i que si més preguntes, doncs faríem un torn de preguntes globals al final. Abans de donar la paraula als ponents, sí que m'agradaria fer 4 punts logístics molt ràpids del webinar. El primer, el vídeo i les presentacions es penjaran a la web d'Acció on veu fer la inscripció. Segon, com us deia, molt important, anar posant les preguntes en el Q&A i després de cada bloc les anireu fent. Recordar-vos que les podeu votar, és a dir, com més likes tinguin són les primeres preguntes que farem. Ho dic per si hi hagués moltes preguntes, doncs fem primer les que tinguin més votacions. Comentar també que avui tenim la gran sort que el govern britànic ens envia diversos especialistes en alguns sectors, com el sector del vi o el sector dels vegetals. Ho dic per si algunes empreses teniu consultes, que sapigueu que a la part del Q&A s'afegiran més experts per donar-vos més suport. Per últim, recordar-vos que, tal com s'havia especificat a la part de la inscripció, l'idioma que utilitzarem avui serà el català, el castellà i l'anglès. Res més, i ara ja sense més dilacions, passo la paraula a Jordi Tordera, consultor sènior de l'Oficina Tècnica de Barreres d'Acció, que ens explicarà els serveis d'Acció per ajudar-vos a fer front al Brexit. Endavant, Jordi.
Perfecte, moltes gràcies, Sandra, i benvinguts a tots. Deixeu que comparteixi pantalla ràpidament. A veure si la veieu. Crec que sí. I ara, ràpidament, passaré a comentar-vos una mica les eines i els serveis que és d'Acció i l'Oficina Tècnica posem a la vostra disposició per fer front al Brexit. La primera pregunta... A veure, que no em deixa passar pantalla. Ara sí. La primera pregunta que sempre fem a les empreses, quan s'adrecen a nosaltres, és si saben com els afecta el Brexit. És evident que si esteu en aquest webinar és perquè ja us heu fet aquesta pregunta. Nosaltres, per tal de donar resposta a aquesta pregunta, el que hem fet és identificar 7 possibles àrees d'impacte del Brexit sobre les vostres empreses, com poden ser temes de fiscalitat, la logística, el marc legal i regulatori, que avui tractarem en profunditat, la mobilitat de persones, el marc financer, l'estratègia de negoci o les duanes, un altre tema que avui tractarem especialment. Per tal de donar resposta a totes aquestes possibles problemàtiques en aquestes àrees, des d'Acció hem dissenyat diferents serveis, que són els que veieu a continuació, en pantalla. El Brexit Desk, l'assessorament Brexit, els serveis de destinació, gràcies a les nostres oficines exteriors, en aquest cas la de Londres, i les jornades Brexit, com les que celebrem avui. En primer lloc, ràpidament us comento el Brexit Desk, que és aquesta finestreta única d'atenció personalitzada. És un servei 100% gratuït, com veieu en pantalla, per a totes les empreses catalanes, i el que fem mitjançant aquest servei és intentar-vos donar resposta d'una manera àgil, la primera resposta en un màxim de 48 hores, amb una informació de primer nivell sobre totes aquelles consultes tècniques que pugueu tenir sobre qualsevol de les àrees que hem vist anteriorment o qualsevol altra àrea que us pugui preocupar de cara al vostre procés d'internacionalització i de treball amb el Regne Unit. Per tal de fer-nos arribar aquestes consultes, ho podeu fer a través del nostre correu electrònic tradesk@gencat.cat o a través del nostre formulari que us recomanem especialment que el feu servir, ja que ens dona molta més informació sobre la vostra empresa i també sobre la consulta. I si no m'equivoco, algun dels meus companys o companyes ja deuen haver compartit la informació en el xat de les preguntes del Q&A. En segon lloc, tenim el servei d'assessorament Brexit. Aquest servei, a diferència del Brexit Desk, és un servei molt més exhaustiu. És també un servei 100% gratuït i aquí el que fem és fer una anàlisi de la relació de la vostra empresa amb el Regne Unit per veure quines són les àrees on aquest Brexit pot tenir un impacte. Les àrees que hem esmentat anteriorment i que veieu en pantalla. A partir d'aquí el que fem és, mitjançant una guia d'impactes que hem dissenyat des de l'oficina tècnica, és veure com us pot afectar el Brexit i quines accions o plans d'actuació podeu dur a terme per tal de pal·liar aquests efectes i o bé començar a treballar amb el Regne Unit o bé seguir-hi treballant de la millor manera possible. Aquestes sessions tenen una durada d'entre una hora i una hora i mitja. Es fan amb un dels nostres consultors, evidentment en el context actual de pandèmia es fan de forma virtual i al final de cada sessió el que fem és entregar-vos un petit informe d'aquestes àrees d'impacte i de les recomanacions o possibles actuacions que podeu dur a terme. Una vegada més, per demanar aquest servei ho podeu fer a través del nostre formulari. En tercer lloc, tenim, com us deia, els serveis de les nostres oficines exteriors de comerç i inversions. Actualment en tenim 40 per donar suport en aproximadament uns 110 mercats a nivell mundial i les oficines, en aquest cas, comptem amb l'inestimable suport de la nostra oficina exterior a Londres per fer front al Brexit, que ofereix, com totes les altres, els serveis que veieu en pantalla. Cerca d'assessors legals i tributaris, contacte amb certificadors locals, que ara és més pertinent que mai amb les noves regulacions que veurem avui, la cerca d'empreses logístiques, una vegada més ara molt rellevant, i la cerca de nous socis comercials. Aquí només comentar-vos que, a diferència dels altres serveis que hem vist fins ara, que eren gratuïts, alguns d'aquests serveis de les oficines són de pagament, tot i que estan subvencionats en gran part per la Generalitat i, per tant, tenen un preu molt competitiu, tenen un cost, ja que impliquen un grau, valgui la redundància, d'implicació molt més alt per part de l'oficina i dels seus consultors amb la vostra empresa. Per últim, comentar-vos el cicle de jornades, com el que celebrem avui. És un cicle de jornades titulat Tot el que necessites saber, que hem dividit en aquest cas per sectors, degut, com sabeu, a les diferents moratòries i dates clau que el govern britànic ha anat aplicant durant aquest 2021 i 2022 per tal de donar temps a les empreses d'adaptar-se a aquesta nova realitat. N'hem realitzat ja un primer al mes de maig sobre el sector químic que podeu recuperar a la nostra plataforma si ho creieu convenient. Avui celebrem el del sector agroalimentari i encara ens en quedarà un al mes d'octubre sobre el sector farmacèutic i un últim sobre noves normatives en general que s'han anat aplicant durant el 2021 i s'aplicaran el 2022. Res més per part meva, us deixo aquí un altre cop el nostre correu i el nostre formulari i res, us animo a enviar-vos les nostres consultes i torno a passar la paraula a la Sandra.
Perfecte, ara sí. Moltes gràcies, Jordi. Doncs ara passarem la paraula a Paul Clark, director del DIT, que ens explicarà, ens farà un update de com està la relació entre Regne Unit i la Unió Europea després d'aquest Brexit. Adelante, Paul, gràcies.
Moltes gràcies, Sandra, Jordi i Acció. Y buen día a todos. Es un placer participar en esta jornada Permítanme hablar en castellano. Estoy aprendiendo el catalán, pero todavía no tengo el nivel para hacer esta intervención. Pero me alegro estar en la jornada. Mi nombre es Paul Clark. Soy el director del Department for International Trade aquí en Barcelona, que es nuestra oficina de comercio. Para los que no nos conocen, tenemos un objetivo parecido a Acció. Estamos aquí para fomentar el comercio e inversión entre el Reino Unido y, en mi caso, Cataluña. No voy a hablar mucho, no porque tengo una resaca después de ver Inglaterra en la semifinal de la Eurocopa anoche, sino porque tenemos expertas aquí desde Londres que van a ser mucho más interesantes que yo, que ellas son las expertas en estos temas. Pero sí quería comentar unas cosas brevemente. Primero, dar las gracias a Acció, no solo por esta jornada, sino todo el ciclo que acaban de mencionar. Es muy importante para dar más información a las empresas sobre la nueva situación actual, y también gracias por la colaboración entre yo y el gobierno británico y Acció, que lo valoramos mucho. Tenemos una relación muy importante, como ustedes saben. De hecho, gracias a ustedes, empresas participantes hoy, solo en el sector agroalimentario intercambiamos casi 1.000 millones de euros de mercancías cada año, o por lo menos antes de la pandemia, y ahora estamos en una tendencia positiva otra vez subiendo. Y no necesito ver las estadísticas porque yo sé, siendo británico, qué importante es los productos catalanes. Hace unas semanas estaba en Reino Unido para una cena familiar, y me acuerdo que todos los vinos en la mesa eran de Cataluña. Eso es solo un producto que es importante no solo para las empresas, sino el consumidor británico. Entonces, esta jornada y este ciclo es muy importante para dar información, porque sí ha habido cambios. Y para mencionar brevemente la nueva relación entre el Reino Unido y la Unión Europea, ahora nuestro comercio está baja del acuerdo de libre comercio que firmamos con la Unión Europea en diciembre del año pasado. El acuerdo es excelente porque es el mejor acuerdo que ha firmado o Reino Unido o la Unión Europea con un tercer país. Establece aranceles de cero y cero cuotas sobre 100% de los productos de origen local, que es algo muy importante, y eso va a ser una gran ayuda a las empresas, pero no es lo mismo que estar en el mercado único o la unión aduanera, y por eso ahora la situación es diferente que antes. En esta jornada vamos a enfocar en controles aduaneros y controles sanitarios y fitosanitarios, pero también mencionar que hay otras normativas que pueden ser relevantes para ustedes y para tener en cuenta. Solo para mencionar dos, por ejemplo, movilidad de personas. Ahora no hay libre circulación de personas, entonces, por ejemplo, si una empresa aquí quiere contratar a un británico que ahora está en Reino Unido, eso requiere un visado. Otro tema, por ejemplo, es los marcados. Imagínate si una empresa aquí tiene una máquina, no un producto fresco, sino una máquina que lleva un marcado CE, de cumplimiento con regulación europea, comunitaria. Para exportar esto al Reino Unido el año que viene se necesitará llevar un marcado UKCA de Reino Unido. Estos son 2 ejemplos, pero hay muchos ejemplos más. Entonces, les recomiendo consultar en las páginas web del gobierno británico o con Axio, como ha comentado Jordi, tiene este servicio excelente para estar al día con toda la nueva normativa. Entonces, ahora voy a pasar la palabra a mis compañeras de Londres que van a hablar más sobre controles sanitarios, fitosanitarios y aduaneros. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Flavia Munteanu, who is joining us from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which is our aduanas department. She's joining by telephone, so unfortunately we won't be able to see her, but we'll be able to hear her. And after Flavia, will be speaking Anastasia Bernhardt from the DEFRA, the UK's Agriculture Ministry. But first of all, over to Flavia. I'm going to share the presentation.
Thanks, Paul. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. I'll just wait for the slides to load. So today, all I'm wanting to cover is a summary of the key messages that we're trying to reinforce ahead of October, first of all, and then the changes that will kick in from a customs perspective in January 2022. So I'll go through a customs overview, some basics just as reminders for people that are importing or exporting goods into GB or out of GB. I'll run through import and export declarations, some requirements that we have introduced and that we are introducing in relation to transit, and the new IT platform called the GVMS. I'll also run through a summary of key dates and then any guidance and support that's available from the government, including from the department that I represent, HMRC. So next slide, please. As a summary of key dates, you will probably already be aware of many of these. The 1st of January 2021 has marked the beginning of partial controls. So that has meant that for non-controlled goods, that's the majority of goods, so excluding things like excise and tobacco, importers could choose to make the declaration in their commercial records only, and they had the opportunity to delay submitting the full declaration to HMRC for up to 175 days after import. That also included a deferral of payment for VAT for up to 6 months. And also we didn't require safety and security declarations. All this set of policies was introduced to facilitate the flow of goods at the border and as part of the government's policy to make sure that the goods keep flowing. The second milestone that I'd like to draw your attention to is the 1st of October, when standalone exit summary declarations will start to be required. So you may already know this, but the UK has introduced a waiver for what is known as a standalone summary declaration, abbreviated EXS. But that waiver will end and will effectively start to be a requirement from the 1st of October. Also, goods moving through roll-on, roll-off routes, where there is a requirement for an exit summary declaration, will be affected by this. So I will draw on this requirement in more detail in subsequent slides, but to mark the date that that is a key milestone for us. The next milestone is the 1st of January 2022, where the majority of changes are coming in. So what I mean by this is full customs controls will kick in, and that will be basically the end of partial controls, as has been the case from the 1st of January 2021. What this means is HMRC will require safety and security declarations for all movements into GB, full customs declarations, unless you're authorized to use simplified procedures, abbreviated CFSP, which would allow you to have access to certain facilitations if you're an authorized trader. It also means that GVMS, so the new IT platform we have introduced, will be required to be used for all applicable movement types. So either transit, or if you're using GVMS as a way to move goods through the pre-lodgement route, which I'll also touch on. That will kick in officially from the 1st of January 2022. And then, of course, there are other requirements that don't necessarily fall to HMRC, it's more for DEFRA, but it's a useful slide so you can visualize what changes are coming and when. Next slide, please. So you might already be familiar with this, but the border operating model is the biggest document that has been published by the government that basically summarizes all the changes that are relevant for anyone who's interacting with the UK's customs systems. The second iteration was published on the 8th of October, but another iteration is coming imminently. We expect that to be published in the next couple of weeks. But there are also other guides online, such as step-by-step import and export guides on gov.uk. And for hauliers specifically, there is a haulier handbook, which is also available online, and that I believe has been translated into multiple languages, including European ones, for people that require it. So in terms of the guidance available, those are your three main documents to look at. If you are a haulier or a carrier, but also if you're a trader, it's very important for you to know Incoterms and conditions. Those are the commercial conditions that should be agreed in the supply chain between the trader, the haulier, the carrier. We do not advise as a department what those conditions should look like, but we'll just urge people to really think about who's responsible for which part of the import and of the export, because different responsibilities apply dependent on what part of the supply chain you are playing. Also, it's absolutely essential that importers and exporters should have an EORI number issued by the UK. Previously, obviously, the UK was using an EU EORI number. That is no longer the case. You now need a GB EORI if you're interacting with UK systems. And of course, you still have to have an EU EORI if you are importing goods into the EU, or in the case of if you're a British trader, you are obviously exporting goods to the EU. Finally, someone who's a haulier, usually based in GB, will also need an EU EORI number because that is required for access to GVMS, the IT platform that I'd already mentioned. More detail is coming in the following slides, but it's good to note that everybody needs an EORI number for GB and for EU. Next slide, please. So just to recap, the UK has introduced border controls in stages following the end of the transition period. As I've already mentioned in the summary slide, with the key dates setting out, we've started with some customs controls from the 1st of January 2021, and we are moving to full customs controls for all goods from the 1st of January 2022. We're not requiring carriers to submit standalone entry summary declarations for safety and security, abbreviated ENS, until the 1st of January 2022. So if you go back to slide 3, that's a very good reminder that doesn't kick in until the 1st of January 2022. Also, for border locations without existing control systems, including roll-on, roll-off ports and listed locations, we are not requiring or we're not controlling EU goods on the basis of declarations until the 1st of January 2022. So again, this is part of the wave of staged controls that we've been applying and supports the flow of goods, minimizing the chance of delays. For import declarations, I'll cover this in more detail perhaps in the following slide, but for traders importing controlled goods, so very important distinction here, that's excise goods, so tobacco, alcohol. The facilitations that I've mentioned above, so the delay of declarations and the possibility of deferring payment for 6 months, do not apply. So anyone who is importing alcohol, tobacco, excise goods basically must complete a full customs declaration, and they have to use the relevant customs procedures when they arrive. So if you think about it in a sort of very easy way, if you're importing non-controlled goods, then you have access to various easements and facilitations. If you're importing controlled goods, primarily excise, you have to already complete full customs declarations. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of more detail for import declarations. if you are using the pre-lodgement route, so if you're submitting your declarations electronically in advance of crossing into GB, so that's usually if you're moving through a listed roll-on, roll-off location, typically a port or a location without existing systems, then the facilitations that I've mentioned above apply if you're moving non-controlled goods. So what that means is that you are allowed to declare your goods by making an entry into your own records, and you are required to keep records of your imports and submit this information via a supplementary declaration within 6 months of import. So what that means is you are freely able to make that entry into your own record and pay the required duty and submit all the required information to HMRC within 6 months of import. This is done via an approved duty deferment account. Now, again, just to recap, this is a requirement that we've introduced to help traders who are still getting accustomed to the new changes that have emerged as a result of EU exit. But all this does not apply for controlled goods. If you're moving controlled goods, you need to make a full frontier declaration, and that can be full or simplified depending on your authorization. You might have heard about CFSP. They are basically a form of authorization for traders who are authorized, and they simplify the process, allowing them to make a simplified rather than a full customs declaration. Next slide, please. For export declarations, all these facilitations I've discussed just now do not apply. So if you're a trader exporting goods from GB to the EU, you will need to submit export declarations for all goods. So you don't have that ability to delay your declaration and submit the information to the authorities with a 6-month delay. You have to submit everything at the point of export. Again, there are different rules that apply for excise goods or goods that move under duty suspense only. The trader must provide proof to HMRC after the goods have left that indeed the goods have exited GB. So again, slightly different variation for excise or goods moving under duty suspense versus traders who are exporting normal non-controlled goods. Next slide, please. I've briefly mentioned the temporary waiver, but I'll just go into a bit more detail. So normally carriers are required to submit to safety and security information, which is done via a combined export declaration. We usually know this as a standalone exit summary declaration, or abbreviated EXS. But HMRC have announced an extension to the waiver on the EXS declarations for the following: empty containers, pallets, and vehicles that are being moved under a transport contract to the EU, or movements that take place via the roll-on, roll-off route. So as I've mentioned, the big ports and locations that normally would use roll-on, roll-off, and that would normally require an EXS declaration. So this extension is actually available until the 30th of September. And from the 1st of October 2021, EXS declarations will be legally required for empty pallets, containers, and vehicles that are moved under a transport contract, and for movements of goods in ro-ro vehicles. So all you need to bear in mind here is the 1st of October 2021. If you're a carrier, you will need to submit a safety and security information via either a combined export declaration or as a standalone exit summary declaration. So this waiver applies up to the 30th of September, following which the waiver is being removed. Next slide, please. There are 2 key routes which traders can take basically to import goods into GB, and those key routes apply for border locations that are receiving goods coming in from GB, from the EU into GB. Basically, we call those 2 models temporary storage and pre-lodgement. They have totally different functions, so I'll explain each one, and it will be very much up to the supply chain and the trader to work with the haulier and agree which model they wish to choose for importing goods into GB. The model that is currently being used to control goods that are moving from the UK, from the rest of the world into the UK, is known as the temporary storage model. So what the temporary storage model means is it allows goods to be stored for up to 90 days at an approved temporary storage facility. So that's within GB, and it just allows authorities to make certain checks if required, and then the goods are released from that facility. Basically, this is the model that has always been used for any imports that come from the rest of the world into the UK. The other model that is available is called the pre-lodgement model, and that's basically the model where you submit a declaration electronically in advance of reaching the border. And the pre-lodgement model ensures that these declarations are pre-lodged before the goods board on the EU side, maintaining flow, especially at high volume locations and ports using roll-on, roll-off. So Dover is quite a good example of this. This model uses the IT platform that I've talked about called GVMS, and that platform has been specifically developed for those locations where ports may not have the space and the infrastructure to operate temporary storage regimes. So many ports just don't have the ability to carry out checks instantaneously when goods arrive. And this is why we're using the pre-lodgement model to make it a lot easier for traders and for hauliers and carriers, and hence that pre-lodgement model exists. Next slide, please. Common Transit Convention is another, or transit for short, is another form of importing goods and is another route that you can take to import goods into the UK. The UK has joined the Common Transit Convention in its own right from the 1st of January and remains subject to the requirements of the convention. In order to move goods under the requirements of the convention, you need to know about 3 different functions of customs: the Office of Departure, the Office of Transit, and the Office of Destination. These functions, especially departure and destination, should be completed at a customs office or an approved location, which we also know as an authorized consignor or consignee. And this is a requirement that's placed on all countries that are members of the CTC. This must be performed before, when the goods arrive in a customs territory, and they must be completed at a customs office upon entry. So we call this the starting of a transit movement and the closure of a transit movement. And there's a list of which locations are approved and known as authorized consignors and consignees. This shouldn't really come as much of a surprise. Many hauliers already use transit, but of course, transit has slightly different requirements to temporary storage and pre-lodgement. So if you are using transit, of course, you'll have to present documentation that it's specific to the transit route, such as a TAD, which is the barcode that you need to show and you need to print in order to complete your movement. I'll come to more details on this as we speak. The next slide, please. Hauliers are an important part of the supply chain, and as I've already mentioned, there is a very important distinction here to be made between the importer and the person responsible for moving the goods. So you need to be very clear on who does what. If you're using delayed declarations or using existing customs processes to complete a full customs declaration, then you need to speak to your haulier and agree what needs to be done so that the correct procedures can be followed. There is a lot of guidance related to this, but it's just very important to agree what the trader's responsibilities are and what the haulier's responsibilities are. In any case, if you're using the roll-on, roll-off route, hauliers must carry evidence of the declaration that has been made. This is called a unique reference number, and you can carry this. Usually it generates a barcode, and I'll explain how this works. But it's just evidence that the right declaration has been made, that all the data has been put through the system, and that you have the necessary EORI number to import goods into GB. There's also a facility that's called Inland Border Facilities, abbreviated IBFs. Again, this is really important for hauliers to know. If, for whatever reason, your goods have to go through further checks, that will be displayed as a message to the haulier, and it will be communicated to them, and they need to go to an inland border facility for further checks. It's basically an approved facility where the government officials can carry further checks on your goods. In order to access this, the best way is to use the IBF app, where you can see which facilities are available and book, so that hauliers don't have to wait, or so that it eases the flow of movement of goods once they arrive in GB. But do note that not all goods will be subject to these checks, but it's just if they are, it's important for hauliers to know that this is the easiest way to go to a facility for further checks. So the IBF app is quite important. Moving on to the next slide. I've spoken about GVMS a little bit, but I'm going to just elaborate on its functions and how it works. So we spoke about two different customs models, one being temporary storage and one being the new pre-lodgement model. GVMS is specifically being developed to facilitate the new pre-lodgement model as an alternative for those ports that don't have the space and infrastructure to hold goods on arrival. GVMS actually is also used for transit movements, and it's already doing this. So it automates the Office of Transit function, marking the entry of goods into GB customs territory. And this function has been available and is already being used since the 1st of January 2021. Now, for other movements, so non-transit movements, for example, movements that use roll-on, roll-off routes through big ports, the platform GVMS will be available and fully functional by January 2022. What the platform will do is it will enable various declaration references, so all the data that you're submitting as part of your customs declaration, to be linked together, so that the person moving the goods, usually this is a haulier, has to present a single reference number. It's called a goods movement reference. And they have to present this at the border to prove that their goods have all the necessary declarations submitted in advance. Very important, this is for the haulier, not for the trader to do, but it's also essential for your goods to actually come into GB. So really important to communicate with your hauliers and have that supply chain resilience that I've spoken about. GVMS basically allows that linking of the movement of the goods to declarations, and it enables the automatic arrival of the declaration in HMRC systems. So before the haulier starts their journey from the EU, they have to submit all the required data, and then that data gets risked and assessed in HMRC systems so that declarations can be processed as they make their journey to GB. When they arrive at the border in GB, that notification of the risking outcome of declarations, are the goods clear, are they not clear, is the haulier good to go to the final destination, or do we need to carry out further checks, will be made clear to them as they arrive at the GB border. And this is because everything will have been done as the haulier makes their journey. HMRC will have all the information, and that final assessment will be communicated to the haulier as they arrive at the border. Next slide, please. This is just a recap of what GVMS stands for. So perhaps it's best if I move on to the next slide so I can show you visually how it's going to work. Right, so if you're an EU haulier and you're coming into GB, but as I've said, this is really important for traders as well to understand, the haulier will need to put all of the information into GVMS. So they'll have to put things like the details for all of the goods, all of the consignments, import, safety and security, transit, if they're using transit. So they have to put all of those details on the GVMS portal. This is available on the UK government's website. And once all the information is provided, so as I've said, the weight of the goods, for example, what they're importing, how many consignments there are, then the system will automatically take all the data, amalgamate it, and produce GMR, which is basically the code that the haulier will need to present as they arrive at the GB border. And this will trigger the automatic arrival of goods into the system, validating the customs declaration. So the GMR is almost a way to verify that all the declaration elements have been completed successfully. As the haulier makes their journey, so step 3, the data is being risked and the officials will provide a status update to the person in control of the goods before they arrive at the border. We get a lot of questions about how this is actually going to happen. Now, if a haulier is en route and they've done the declaration and they've done it electronically before they left, it will either come to them as a notification on their phone, or if it's done by the head office, then the head office will be contacted and informed of how of the outcome of the notification, basically. And so it's the responsibility of the head office to communicate this to the haulier as to whether the goods are cleared to go or whether they need to go for further checks. Next slide, please. So the same system applies in reverse. If you're exporting goods from GB, the same sort of reference numbers have to be put in, the data has to be inputted, the haulier awaits permission to progress to the port of departure, a GMR is being created, triggering the arrival process, and then they receive a notification that the goods have departed and that they're good to go. So I hope that explains it, but happy to take any questions on GVMS later on. Next slide, please. Very quick overview on that. I've mentioned that as part of the postponed customs declaration, so as part of the stage controls, we are also introducing a requirement for postponed VAT. All that this means is that if you're delaying your declarations into HMRC's systems, then you also need to delay VAT. And this is usually the responsibility of the trader. So if you're choosing to make a delayed declaration, then you need to postpone your VAT so that they both get submitted to HMRC at the same time. I think I'll stop there. It's very high level detail, but quite straightforward. And the next slide, please. For any guidance and additional support, we have a 24/7 customer support model with a phone number that you can call, which is listed on the slide. We also have extended our helpline to 7 days a week, Monday to Friday. And also, I've already mentioned all the available guidance that you can see online, but I think it'd be quite helpful for anybody who's interacting with GB systems to just get familiar with it. But as we say, we also have a helpline, the customer support model for those who need additional help, and especially also for hauliers if they're stuck at the border, or if your goods are stuck at the border, you can also ring the helpline directly. So I hope this helps, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much indeed, Flavia. It was a great presentation and very important information for our companies. We do have some questions. So as we mentioned at the beginning, as Sandra said, we're gonna hold a short Q&A first. And then if there are any more questions, ho diré en català, I'm gonna say in català, si teniu més preguntes, les podeu continuar anotant al nostre Q&A i farem un segon Q&A, si us en venen més en ment, al final de les presentacions. So as I said, we have, I think, 5 questions right now. The first one says, our company registered to get a VAT number 2 months ago, but we don't have it yet. Is there currently an issue with VAT number registry?
Hi, so there are some delays and there is a backlog with VAT numbers. I think the best thing to do is to send us an email outlining when you've registered and how long you've been waiting for, and our team can redirect it to the VAT team to look into this in further detail.
Wonderful, thank you very much. I have to say, if you need information about the email, you can send a question to ODB, to our office, and we'll gladly send you the email address. Next question, this one is in Spanish, and it says, Spain produces and ships tons of fresh product to the UK, which will surely benefit from the pre-lodgement model. Can this model be used in any border location? In other words, those border locations most used by Catalan companies?
So, yeah, no, the pre-lodgement model and the temporary storage model are specific to certain locations. There is a link. I'm going to try and dig it out and put it or maybe send it via yourself.
Yes,
with
thank
all
you.
the locations, and you can see which are using which port basically. We are working with delivery colleagues, so with ports, because not everything has been finalized. So obviously it's a commercial decision. Each port decides what location they wish to use, but there is already a list of locations which have declared what system they'll be using. So you can already take a look at that on gov.uk.
This is a question from myself, but I guess that the UK government is also working with European Union customs or other agencies to make sure that they are informed of where these locations are, right? To make
Yes,
it.
Of course. So
What I mean is that it's more a question for the hauliers and the transport agencies that they should be informed, but it's
so precisely, we have pretty much weekly engagement with the EU member states, including port stakeholders and customs officials, and we have technical and very intense conversations around how the models are going to work and who needs to be aware of the changes, especially around challenges for hauliers. So rest assured, and I think Spain is actually one of the top countries. We're engaging with the head of the Spanish customs on this on a regular basis via Cabinet Office and HMRC and DEFRA.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Another question says, if we work exclusively in export conditions, do we need to use, you need the UK AORI number, or all the paperwork and another stuff is done by the courier or the importer? This is a winery asking.
Yeah, so, okay. You still need a AORI number in any case, even if you're importing excise. But what I should make clear is, of course, it works a little bit differently in that you have additional requirements for EXW. This isn't entirely my area of expertise, but what I will say is that if you're using an AORI number, just make clear whose AORI number you're using. So for example, if the haulier is doing it on your behalf as a trader, make sure they have authorization to use your AORI number as a trader. They can also use their AORI number, but it needs to be agreed between the trader and the haulier. EXW specific questions are not for my remit. I think that goes into commercial decisions, but I can always link you up with the excise team if helpful.
That would be very helpful indeed. I would like to ask myself here, because this is a question that we usually get at our office, that X works, even though it's very commonly used, now that the UK is a third country to the EU, might not be the best idea. Other Incoterms like FCA would be more suitable, because this way, now again that it's a third country, you have as the company sending the product transport document that you wouldn't have with the exports. But if you want more information, next November we have a webinar about Incoterms that you should all join. All right, next question says, is the GMR system that can include several unique reference numbers similar to the French envelope system? If the transport is traveling via Calais, will the haulier need to have both the envelope and the GMR, or would the GMR work at the French border too?
Okay, so that's a question for French authorities.
I guess so, yeah.
Not for me to answer, but yes, for the UK, basically, you'll have a single GMR. So what the system does is it conglomerates all of your references individually. So let's say you have multiple consignments. It will just take all of those consignments individually and amalgamate them into one, and it produces a single GMR. I can't speak for the French.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. As far as I know, it's a similar system. So this way, when they check the number of the GMR, or in that case, the envelope, all the other ones are automatically downloaded in the system as well. So the unique numbers, the unique reference numbers. Okay, another question says, Flavia, you mentioned that border locations without existing control systems at the end of the transition are not required to control EU goods on the basis of declarations until the 1st of January 2022. For better understanding, could you explain again how the goods will be controlled in those locations?
So it's not that we're not carrying out any checks. There are some checks that may be required to be carried out, but nowhere near the level that you would expect from the 1st of January 2022. So the systems at the moment, so the way it works is you'll still have to do a declaration, which is basically in your own records, you'll have to write, the import, the sort of consignments, what you've imported, make sure that all the data is registered, because you'll still have to submit that. You'll have to submit that declaration, which is called a supplementary declaration, within 175 days from the day of import. So it's not like we're not going to check at all. That declaration will be required within 6 months. But of course, if we have any suspicions about a consignment, there will be ad hoc checks that are carried out on the spot. So that's a border force policy, that they can still carry out checks and stop hauliers if they're worried about it. I've also mentioned inland border facilities. That's another way in which we check. So if there is a worry about the consignment, or there's potentially, some sort of risk, and also I've said that there is quite a lot of ad hoc checking, then the haulier will be directed to an inland border facility, which is this approved facility inside GB, where their checks will be carried out. So that's another way in which we do carry out the checks. So that's what I would say in terms of how we're doing it in parallel. But there's also the temporary storage model, which keeps operating, as well as this new pre-lodgement model and transit. So it depends on the routes they're taking.
Wonderful, understood. Thank you very much. We have one last question. I don't know if it's in your area of expertise or it's more directed to the authorities in general, and maybe afterwards, later on, Paul Clark can give his opinion as well. But it says, we are currently facing problems with the shipments to the UK, and according to the news, it is due to a shortage of truck drivers worldwide increased by the COVID-19 crisis. It seems that the situation is worse in the United Kingdom due to Brexit. What are the causes? How is it affecting the agri-food sector in the UK, and what measures are being taken?
So I can't speak about the agri-food sector, and actually I don't think I can speak to how many truck drivers we have, simply because that falls to the Department for Transport rather than HMRC, and also it has a political angle. So I don't think
Absolutely.
I can do this one, I'm afraid.
No problem. No problem. Yeah, as I said, it's probably more directed to the authorities in general, or someone else should answer it. But anyway, thank you very much for the presentation. As I said before, to the attendees, you can keep posting questions for Flavia if you come up with any more ideas. And at the end, we'll have another short Q&A. Now, I would like to give the floor, as Paul Clark said before, to Anastasia Bernhardt from DEFRA. The floor is yours, Anastasia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jordi, and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Anastasia Bernhardt, and I work for the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So I lead the team responsible for working with EU businesses to help them to prepare for upcoming import controls for food and drink entering Great Britain. So today I'm going to be clarifying the UK government's timeline for the phased introduction of controls on sanitary and phytosanitary goods being exported from the EU into Great Britain. We will also have a short slide on wine as well, and I also have my colleagues Philip Monday and George Couch on the line from our wine team, who should be able to answer any of your questions on that subject. I'm also joined by my colleague Michaela Tharby, who is one of our policy experts on products of animal origin as well. So if we can move on to the next slide. Now, I have a limited period of time to talk to you today, so I am not going to run through sort of the phases and the existing sanitary and phytosanitary controls that came into force in January earlier this year. But if you would like a reminder, the details are included here in the slide pack, which will be shared with you. So Paul, if we could possibly move along to slide 6, which starts to cover off products of animal origin. Perfect, thank you, that's the one. So this slide gives you an overview of the timeline for all of the import controls coming in for sanitary and phytosanitary products, for products of animal origin. So what I mean by this is any product that has come from an animal and that is eaten by humans, so things like dairy, things like meat, things like fish. So from October 2021, products of animal origin will need to be pre-notified on IPAFs, which is the new IT system for doing so. Now, this is something that your importer in Great Britain will need to do. These products will also need to be accompanied by the relevant health certificate. Now, as the EU exporter, you are responsible for obtaining that health certificate. I will come back and cover health certificates in a bit more detail a bit later in this presentation. But what you need to know is that you must ensure that you provide a copy of that certificate to your importer in Great Britain so that they can then upload it onto the IPAF's IT system to make the pre-notification and to enable remote documentary checks to take place from October. You should ensure that that copy is provided to your importer as soon as it is possible for you to do so. Now, there are certain composite products that are exempt from these rules, and that is under Article 6 of Regulation 2007-275. And these are products that are a combination of processed products of animal origin and plants. Again, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit more detail in a moment for you. Now, if we look ahead to January 2022, the requirements to pre-notify on IPAFs and produce the relevant health certificate continue to apply. However, these products now must also arrive at an established point of entry with an appropriate border control post for that product. Now, there are also some details here on 1st of March 2022, but I'm going to come back and talk to you about live animals and plants a little bit later. So if we can move on a couple of slides, please. Yes, that's the one, composite products. So as I've just mentioned, this is an area where we receive a lot of questions from businesses. So these are products that are both processed products of animal origin and products of plant origin, and where the processing of the primary product is an integral part of the production of the final product. So to make that a bit simpler, just a few examples. So that could be a ready meal lasagna or mayonnaise if it contains more than 50% egg. Now, composite products would normally follow the stage requirements for products of animal origin, as I've just laid out for you, but there are a few exemptions. So some goods are exempt if they contain less than 50% of a processed animal product, they contain no meat product, and they meet the requirements set out in legislation. Now, if your good does contain any meat product or it has more than 50% animal product, it must be pre-notified using IPAFs, accompanied by a health certificate, and follow the phased approach set out for products of animal origin. Now, if we can move to the next slide, please. Now, I've included this here. This slide is talking about animal byproducts, which is anything that comes from an animal but is not for human consumption. So that's skins or hides from slaughterhouse processes. Now, this is quite a niche area, but if this is of interest to you and your business, there is some more detail for you on this slide here. Just to say, the controls are broadly very similar to those for products of animal origin, but only products with certain CN codes will need to enter via a border control post in January 2022. So if we can move to the next slide and the next one. Thank you. So for live animals and germinal products, since January this year, they have already been required to pre-notify using IPAFs at least 1 working day before the expected time of arrival at the point of entry. And for animals, they need to be accompanied by a health certificate as well. Now, your importer in Great Britain should already be supplying the EU exporter or official veterinarian with the unique notification number that is produced when the importer pre-notifies the UK's Animal Plant Health Agency about the import via IPAFs. Now, as the exporter, you must add the UNN number to the commercial documentation or the health certificate. And just to say, physical checks on live animals are carried out at destination. So that's where we are currently with these products and with live animals. And these measures will continue to apply. However, by 1st of January 2022, there will also be new requirements for germinal products to enter via an established point of entry with an appropriate border control post. And by March 2022, live animals must also enter via an established point of entry with an appropriate border control post for documentary, identity, and physical checks. And high-risk live animals will continue to be checked at 100%. And on to the next slide, please. So now if we move on to talk about plants and plant products, so currently only high priority plants are subject to import controls, and that has been the case since the 1st of January. The next set of changes, if you trade in these products that you need to be aware of, are coming into force on 1st of January 2022. Now, at this point, high priority plants and products will no longer undergo physical and identity checks at place of destination. And from January 2022, these checks will take place at an appropriate border control post. Also, by January, all regulated plants and plant products will need to follow the requirements for pre-notification and to be accompanied by phytosanitary certification. By March 2022, physical and identity checks on all regulated plants and plant products will be carried out at border control posts. If we can move on to the next slide. Now, this gives a bit more information for you on IPAFs, which is the new IT system for pre-notifying the arrival of products. I'm not going to go into much detail on this now, as this is an action for your importer in Great Britain to take. However, this slide will be included in the slide deck, which you will receive after today's event, and you can refer to it for your own information. On to the next slide, please. Where I'll give you sort of a quick word on pre-notification times. So if you are moving live animals, those need to be pre-notified on IPAFs at least 1 working day in advance of the goods arrival at the point of entry. For plants and plant products, your importer in Great Britain needs to submit import notifications at least 4 hours prior to the arrival for roll-on and roll-off, as well as air movements, or at least 1 working day prior to arrival by all other modes of transport. And that also, again, has to be accompanied by the phytosanitary certificate. And pre-authorization by DEFRA, or the Animal and Plant Health Agency in the UK, of any animal byproducts prior to any imports taking place may also be required. Now, if we can move on to the next slide. So as promised, a bit more information for you on health certification. So this is the SPS documentation that needs to travel with exports of products of animal origin to Great Britain. So these already must accompany any products of animal origin that are under safeguard measures. Where safeguard measures apply, there is a safeguard version of the health certificate that must be used, and you will need to continue to use the safeguard version of certificates where necessary. From October 2021, a health certificate will be required for products of animal origin for human consumption and for some animal byproducts as well. Now, as the exporter, it's your responsibility to obtain that health certificate. This health certificate will be issued to you by the competent authority in the country you are based in, and the certifying officer is authorised by the competent authority and must complete the official certificate. Now, what I mean by certifying officer, that could be an official veterinarian or an official inspector, as defined by the relevant EU retained legislation. And they must also make sure that they can clearly have completed all designated fields. Now, any official SPS documents that are required to accompany the health certificate, so that could be additional attestations or lab results, will be specified on the relevant health certificate. Now, again, other documentation may also be required depending on the commodity you're exporting. So for an example, you will need a catch certificate for any marine caught fish. If you want to get a feel for how these health certificates will look, there is a whole range of model health certificates available on gov.uk, and you are able to use those to check the specific requirements for your commodity. Now, just to be really clear, these are only model example certificates, and the certificates that you need for your products will be issued by the relevant competent authority in your country. Now, there may be rare instances where a harmonised health certificate is not available for your product of animal origin. If that is the case and you cannot identify an appropriate health certificate, you should speak with your importer in Great Britain and check on gov.uk for a general licence. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So just to clarify, a few controls on wine being imported from the EU into Great Britain. So all wine sector products, that's including things like grape must and wine vinegar, that are imported into Great Britain from the EU. And that does also, just to be clear, include wine that has originated from outside of the EU. That can travel without having to produce a TCA certificate or a VI1 certificate, but that is only the case until the 31st of December 2021. So from 1st of January 2022 onwards, the situation will change as follows. So finished wine of EU origin will be able to travel to Great Britain under the simplified certificate set out in the Technical Barrier to Trade Annex 5 on trade in wine of the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Additionally, wine of non-EU origin or grape must or wine vinegar of EU origin should use the VI1 certificate as set out in the retained regulation 2018-273. Now, situations where you do not need to provide a VI1 to import wine of any origin to Great Britain remain in place. So to give you two examples, that would be for the shipment of less than 100 litres and also shipments from one private individual to another for up to 30 litres of volume. On to the next slide, please. Now I've included this as we've had quite a few requests for clarification from Spanish businesses on this point. Phytosanitary certificates are not required for plant products that have been processed and packaged to the point that they no longer pose any biosecurity risk. Therefore, processed products such as olive oil do not require a phytosanitary certificate and won't be subject to import checks as part of the new phased import controls for plants and plant products. Now, we do recommend, however, that you check the DEFRA Plant Health portal for a list of goods that do require pre-notification and phytosanitary certification. And we can make sure that that link to the Plant Health portal is shared with you after today's event as well. If we can move on to the final slide, where I will just summarise for you. So the two sort of imminent key dates you need to remember are 1st of October. So what you need to remember for then is making sure you have the relevant health certificate for your product. Provide your importer in Great Britain with a copy of the completed health certificate as soon as it is available to you, and ensure the original certificate travels with the consignment. Then from 1st of January 2022, for plants, you need to ensure a phytosanitary certificate travels with the consignment and that your importer based in Great Britain submits a pre-notification. That is it from me today. Thank you all so much for your attention. As I said, I've got a few colleagues on the line, also from the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who will be able to answer your questions. So thank you. Back to you, Geordie.
Thank you so much, Anastasia, and thank you all. Thank you the rest of the speakers to join us to support the Q&A. What we'll do is we have several questions, quite a lot, and then Anastasia, I will need your help to see which question is addressed to which of your colleagues, and we'll do it like this. Let's see, we do have a first question that says, we do sell frozen pastry, some with no animal ingredients, a good part of it with animal ingredients like milk, eggs, but not meat, and some SKUs with meat, ham, and so on. What about a delivery that would include both products exempt and non-exempt from pre-notification and EHC? Would they have to go with a different set of documents? Could they go on the same consignment?
Thank you, Geordie. I am going to hand that one over to Michaela to answer.
All right. Let's see if Michaela can join us.
Hi everyone, thank you. I think it should be working. So this is about the pastries. So non-exempt and exempt products. So in which case I wouldn't say that there would be the same consignment. So there's quite an exact definition of a consignment. So that's a number of animals or quantity of goods covered by the same official certificate or official attestation, and being of the same type, class and description. So I wouldn't say that those kind of exempt pastries and non-exempt meat product would be the same consignment, so they would require separate paperwork. So, for example, the meat product would require a health certificate, and then the baked goods that meet the requirements to be exempt under Article 6 of 2007/275 would require a commercial documentation. So I wouldn't group them into one consignment.
Perfect. Thank you, Michaela. I think you can stay on because maybe the next one, if I'm not mistaken, is addressed also to you. And it says, when you said POAO with less than 50% processed animal product, do not need sanitary control and customs declaration. Were you talking about import or export? Sorry, I got lost.
So this might be a good time to clarify that we're talking about exporting to Great Britain, or from my perspective, you're importing to me, because there are different rules, particularly around composite products for imports and exports with the animal health regulation changes. So just to clarify, when we talk about composite products and Article 6 of 2007/275 and that 50% threshold, as well as other requirements, we are talking about exports into Great Britain. Cannot advise on importing into EU countries.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. We have a next question that might be addressed to someone else. It's about, I know, hold on. Yeah, maybe, probably. I'll read it anyway, you decide. You let me know. Regarding life plants, nursery stock, high priority, we have been exporting smoothly to GB since January 2021 with the phytosanitary certificate. However, the UK changed their phytosanitary regulations on March, changing the required additional declarations on the phyto certificate for many species. Thus, the UK plan to change the regulations often. In our opinion, that change in March was not fully aligned with the WTO practices. Question. Does DEFRA plan to keep diverging with the EU plant health regulations?
Thanks, Jordi. I'm going to hand that over to my colleague, Vicky.
Hi, I think I'm going to have to take this one away, Anastasia, because it's more of a BAU policy sort of regulation answer. So if we could take that one away, that would be much appreciated. It might be useful if the person who asked the question in the chat puts the specifics in there about what their specific plants they're referring to, and I can get a specific answer if that's okay.
As we said at the beginning of the webinar, any other questions, further questions, or questions that cannot be answered due to the complexity today can be answered afterwards. So we'll get back to you, to all the attendees, once the webinar is finished.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Victoria. All right, let me go to the next question. And it says, let me scroll down just a little bit. We have quite a lot. We'll go with this one. The health certificates are from the company or for each product with a bed sign?
So I think that means whether the health certificates are for the are done by the company or each product, in which case the health certificate is issued per consignment. So essentially shipment of products, and it would be the certifying officer, in most cases a vet, who would sign the health certificate. So the core thing about health certificates is they are issued by the competent authority in the exporting country, in line with Great Britain's importing requirements. So it's essentially per consignment or product in the consignment basis. All
right, thank you very much, Michaela. Wait, I was looking for a question, but it moved. This here, in relation to the phytosanitary certificate, will electronic certificates be accepted? This is asked by Afrocat.
I think that would be one for Vicky.
Vicky, if you would like to join us back.
I heard the word phyto, and that's plants.
Phyto, so yeah.
I'm animals and animal products.
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute there. Sorry. So could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, it says, in relation to phytosanitary certificate, will electronic certificates be accepted?
Will phytosanitaries be accepted?
The certificate.
I'm not sure I understand what the question is.
Well, we'll leave it here.
Oh, electronic. Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
Oh, sorry.
Apologies. Yes. So not currently. That we're not currently accepting electronic certificates. Our focus at the moment, as Anastasia sort of said, is getting our new IT system up and running. And once that priority is done, our focus then will then shift to sort of e-phytos. So it's absolutely our priority once our IT system is up and running. So it is absolutely our intention to get that working shortly. I hope that helps.
All right, thank you very much, Victoria. Absolutely, it does. All right, another one says, when will DEFRA be connected to traces?
Michaela, is that one you can talk to?
Yep, so that's one for me. So currently, I don't know. There would be something we'd have to take away for a member of the IPAFS team. In terms of connecting to traces, currently the health certificates are issued by the competent authority in the exporting country, and the GB importer or a representative on their behalf uses a system called IPAFS to pre-notify. I know there's a lot of different work being done to build very robust systems on both sides, and a lot of different conversations. So that might be one we take away and answer properly in writing.
Thank you very much. So the person asking the question will get back to you once the webinar is finished and the next days. Our next question says, we are currently facing problems with shipments to the UK. I know this one is for Paul, we'll reserve it for later. This one. In the wine sector, it is usual to send samples to importers, wine writers, contests, which didn't face duties VAT. With Brexit, this has changed, which makes it more difficult for small wineries. Is there any plan to change this policy, or is there any way to avoid these payments? Because we're talking about samples, I guess.
Thank you, Geordie. Now I hear the word VAT and I wonder if actually perhaps that's a question for HMRC, but I might just turn to Philip Monday or George Couch from our wine teams if they have anything they can add to that.
Thanks, Anastasia. I hope you can hear me. Right. Yeah, good, excellent.
I can see you.
That's lovely. Okay, then. So yes, I think it is an HMRC question. I think there are some links through to the wine policy, though, in relation to, there are exemptions in relation to the wine policy certification arrangements for moving wine products into the UK that mean that the TCA certificate that Anastasia talked about earlier in her presentation would not apply. But this is predominantly a question, I think, for HMRC because it's a VAT issue.
I don't know if Flavia can answer this question afterwards, or if she would like to join us. Let me check real quick.
Can't see.
We'll leave it for later. Anyway, after we finish these questions, Flavia can join us as well, and we'll keep the question here for her. But now that we have you here, Philip, we have another question related to wine, I think. It says, other related wine products such as wine cheese that contain wine in it, Pinot Noir salt, wine jam, or gummies, are they subjected to the same standards as wine imports?
No, these won't fall under the wine import arrangements. Wine imports are purely for, purely in relation to 2204 CM products. So anything like cheese or jam would fall under the sort of tariff codes that they fall under.
All right, thank you very much. Perfect. Another question says, one last one that I have here. This is in Catalan, so I'm going to try to translate live. Let's see how that works. We're missing the participation of some representatives from Spain, even though we have been exporting plants without problems, going through PIVs and BCPs for the phytosanitary certificates. We are afraid that with such necessary documentation and certificates for all the vegetables, there might be problems in the customs, so the system might collapse. Is the ministry preparing for any delays or for such problems? Have you done any works to increase the personnel and the time, the schedules at the PIF's installations facilities.
Thanks, Jordi. Just to be clear, is this a question related to plant exports?
Plant exports, yes.
Vicky, have you got a bit more information you can give on the preparations of UK government on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk. There was sort of mention of customs and stuff then in that question, but absolutely from a plant health perspective, we have been recruiting plant health seed inspectors to ensure that it's sort of doing lots of analysis, etc., on the sort of trade numbers that we expected and making sure that we've got the right amount of resources to actually carry out those checks safely in terms of biosecurity, effectively and efficiently at the border, and building those BCPs to make sure that they can handle that capacity. I think that sort of answers it from a plant's perspective, but I don't know if there's a further that needs to be explored from the
I think perspective. It's a wonderful information and a good answer, because I think it's not only relevant to the Catalan agri sector, but also the rest of Spain, because as you said before, we do ship a lot of fresh product and vegetables to the UK, so it's very relevant.
Yeah.
All right. So
lots of planning.
Yeah, unless you do. All right. So this was the last question. Now, no, we have another one. My question, regarding what we were mentioning just now. My question. Hold on, because the question moved. My question was about Spanish BCP, which can be a bottleneck if not ready on January 1st. So I guess it concerns more the Spanish side of the customs and how this will affect the transportation to the UK. But I think it was pretty much answered by Vicky.
Yeah, I'm afraid I've got nothing further on that one for you, Jordi.
Right. Yeah, no problem. That was a wonderful answer. Okay, so these were all the questions for DEFRA. Thank you very much for your assistance. Now I would like to ask Paul to join us, because we did keep a question for him, if he can give us put some light in this issue. Paul, are you there? Yeah, it takes a while. Here we are.
Yes. Yeah, just to come in on the question about the lorry drivers. And yeah, the point about it mainly being related to COVID, and yeah, I think that's true. I think one of the problems is that it's been difficult to do driving tests for new drivers because of COVID. You couldn't have the examiner and the person close together. But I know the UK has been, as the COVID situation has improved, the UK is investing a lot of resources into trying to do more and more tests to get more drivers. And also just this week, the Transport Secretary, the Minister for Transport, announced that there'll be, from the 12th of July, we'll be increasing the flexibility around driving hours, to allow drivers to do and operators to do slightly longer journeys to try and help ease the situation. As Flavia said, it's the Department for Transport which is leading on this policy, not customs. But yeah, there's been that announcement this week by the Transport Ministry, and that measure on hours, on driving, on more and more driving tests, and other measures, it says will be coming too. So hopefully that will help the situation.
Thank you so much, Paul, for the information, for the feedback. And before Anastasia left and the other ones, and Michaela and Philip and Victoria, I want to thank them again for taking the time. I know how busy they are with webinars all over Europe, so we wanted to thank them especially for taking time to take part in our webinar. As they know, and as you know, the agri-food sector is key in the Catalan economy and the company's business system. So thank you very much again. I'm sure the information will be very useful for all our companies attending this webinar. And now, ara passo ja per fer la cluenda, el torn de paraula a Sandra Font.
Molt bé, moltes gràcies. Realment molts detalls. És cert que sí que els aranzels són zero, però sí que també és cert que hem de preparar i ens hem d'adaptar i anar seguint aquests canvis amb aquestes noves dates. Important fer-les amb suficient antelació. volia recordar poques coses que alguns ho heu preguntat en el Q&A. Les presentacions i el vídeo es penjaran a la web d'Acció, amb la qual les podreu mirar amb més calma que alguns heu mirat, són molts detalls i moltes especificitats. Recordar-vos que qualsevol consulta que tingueu sobre el Brexit, que surti a partir d'avui, o possibles barreres tècniques que tingueu més endavant, les podeu enviar a l'Oficina Tècnica de Barreres d'Acció. Us deixo l'email un altre cop, tradedesk@gencat.cat. Us la respondrem en màxim 48 hores, sense cap cost per l'empresa. També aprofito per recordar que el 17 de setembre farem una sessió sobre Incoterms. Les inscripcions ja estan obertes, podeu anar a l'agenda d'Acció i us podeu apuntar. I res més, thank you very much, Paul, Flavia, Anastasia, Micaela, Philip, Victoria and Alice. Thank you for being here. Gràcies als assistents i esperem que us hagi estat d'utilitat. Fins al proper webinar.